In this video, we will cover the key concepts of bee training. We will explain how bees are conditioned to exhibit specific behaviors, reference important people who are involved in the success of bee training, and compare the advantages and disadvantages of using trained bees above other animals. By the end of this module, you should be able to explain the process of classical conditioning used to train bees and how they learn behavior from each other, articulate the reasons humans have facilitated the training of bees, argue the different factors that make trained bees superior to other trained animals, and lastly, become familiar with influential people in bee training. We're going to start by defining a couple terms that will help you follow along a bit easier. The first one is proboscis extension response. When the antenna is stimulated by sugar water, the proboscis automatically sticks out to drink. This reflex response can be used to study insect learning and memory. Proboscis extension response is most commonly used in associative learning experiments in honeybees and bumblebees because it's easy to use for simple Pavlovian conditioning. The other term that we feel is important is classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is a type of learning process in which a conditioned stimulus that had not previously produced a particular response becomes associated with an unconditioned stimulus that produces the response. In the case of honeybees, the unconditioned stimulus would be sugar water because it naturally triggers a specific unconditioned response. The conditioned response is the learned behavior in response to the conditioned stimulus because the bees have previously given a neutral response. To further your understanding on classical conditioning, we have attached a video provided by National Geographic. This video displays how bees are trained through the method of classical conditioning in a visual format. It also introduces the idea that bees learn best in a social environment. Moving forward to our second learning objective, we're going to look at several different things that bees have been trained to do. Starting with a relatively simple task, bees have been trained to pull a string when rewarded with sugar water. What makes this important is that bees wouldn't naturally tug at a string, so it shows that they respond to a reward system and will perform necessary tasks to receive that reward. Building off that study, researchers have also found that bees could be trained to play basic soccer. Using an imitation plastic bee to demonstrate the process and a reward of sugar water, bees were conditioned to push a ball into a goal. Both of these studies are simplistic, yet they prove how bees can be incentivized to learn new tasks, and they also give a baseline for new studies to build from. Transitioning into a more serious setting, bees are also being used to detect cancer in patients. They are first trained to associate the specific chemical odor that has been proven cancerous with food. With the assistance of a glass chamber used to harness the bees, the patient in question would then blow into this chamber. Because of the conditioning, the bees will then swarm around the breath of the patient if they detect the chemical. This study opens up the doors for bees in the medical field and could offer huge advancements in our current technology. Continuing with serious projects, bees have been able to successfully discover bombs. With classical conditioning, once again, bees are trained to identify volatile compounds found in explosives. One of the chemists on the project have found that bees prove to be more sensitive than many sophisticated man-made devices. Even when masked with other odors, like deodorants, lotions, and tobacco products, bees continue to successfully identify explosive components. Not only are bees in the works to replace bomb-sniffing dogs, but they're also taking over by detecting illegal drugs as well. Researchers at the University of Cologne have successfully trained bees to tell the difference between heroin and cocaine. With the knowledge gained from training bees to do these specific tasks, they have opened up endless possibilities. Bees have been proven to be quite useful to humans, and it will be interesting to see what else they're capable of doing. Now that we have a better understanding of what bees can be trained to do, we're going to see why we choose to train bees over other animals. Our third learning objective. According to Dr. Jerry Bromanshank, who we'll talk more about shortly, honeybees are far superior to any other current technology because you can send literally hundreds of trained foragers into a field versus only a few detectors. Above all, it's the anatomy of a bee that contributes most to their superiority. In instances like searching for bombs, being able to fly enables bees to cover a much greater distance in comparison to dogs or rats. And since they're not laying on the ground, the bees are also unable to set off the explosives. Continuing with their anatomy, the antennae adds to a bee's success as well, because they allow for bees to pick up scents quicker and more accurately than other animals. Unlike dogs who have to be trained individually with special one-on-one attention, bees are able to be trained in groups, primarily due to their ability to learn socially. The main downside to using bees is that swarms of bees can be quite difficult to track, which shouldn't come as a surprise. In a training setting, following the bees is pretty manageable, but once they're out on an open field, it's easy to lose them. Overall, the many advantages for training bees over other animals far outweighs the few disadvantages. Transitioning into our fourth and final learning objective, we'd like to highlight a very influential person in the topic of bee training. Dr. Jerry Bromanshank, who we briefly mentioned, is retired from the University of Montana with a PhD in entomology, the study of insects. He is credited for his 44 years of research with honeybees. Dr. Bromanshank is known as a pioneer in this field and is recognized for using honeybees as environmental monitors. Working with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. Department of Energy, and U.S. Department of Defense, he was able to develop ways to manipulate bee activity in a beneficial way for humans. This led to the creation of the first master beekeeping program in 2012. This program teaches individuals specific components on beekeeping. But overall, Dr. Bromanshank is best known for developing a method to use trained honeybees to detect and identify minuscule amounts of chemical agents, which you should be fairly familiar with by now. His work and dedication to bees continues to influence this field of bee training. Thanks, guys, for taking the time to learn about bee training. As you can see from our long list of references, we are more than qualified to talk about this subject. And now, you guys should be experts as well. Since you all have a great understanding of the learning objectives, the rest of this module should be a breeze.